Good morning and welcome to Leadership Summit 2021. I'm Missy Macon, the Program Director for Rogers Lead WT, and Leadership Summit is a project of the Rogers Lead WT Senior Scholars. They have worked really, really hard today, and we are so excited to hear what they have to say. This is really kind of a special Leadership Summit because it's our first ever virtual-only Leadership Summit. Like everybody else over the past year, we've had to make adjustments and changes, and these guys have really just rolled with the punches and have done a wonderful job. We think that you're going to enjoy what they have to say and have a lot to take away from this morning as well.
Very good. Thank you, Missy. My name is Rick Hossel. I have the blessing of serving as the faculty director for Rogers Lead WT. The Leadership Summit is an annual event that's presented by the Senior Scholars. However, we want to be very clear up front that this has not been a normal year of preparation. Missy and I have had some personal issues that's caused us to be away from campus, so the Senior Scholars have basically spent countless hours preparing on their own for this, and we know it's going to be very good when we see the final product today. Along with speaking about preparation, they're not here, but they're attending virtually. We would like to recognize who we refer to affectionately as our celebrity judges, who 2 weeks ago spent one of their Fridays listening to the presentations and offering feedback to each of the groups. Dr. Noah Franken, Ms. Carolyn Baum, and Ms. Paula Schlegel. They're out there somewhere, we hope, watching, and we just want you to know how much we appreciate the time you invested, and we know that the Senior Scholars would echo that if they had the opportunity now to express their gratitude to you for that. Also, she's not in the room right now, but she will be, I believe, and she's watching Kimberly Cornelson. We'd like to recognize her and express our thanks to her. She basically pinch hit for Missy and I over the last 2 weeks and went through the dress rehearsal and everything with the Senior Scholars last year, so we are very thankful for Kimberly as well. And lastly, we would like to thank the people who, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. So our founders are Dyke and Terry Rogers. They've joined us this morning, and we are, yes, thank you, very good. We are eternally grateful for, obviously, the financial support, but more importantly, the mentoring and all of the encouragement and support they've given us over the years, and without them, none of this would be possible. So thank you very much.
First, we'd like to begin with conversations with Quincy. Quincy Henderson is the associate head basketball coach for the men's basketball team, and we are excited for him to join us today.
My turn so I can see a little bit. Okay, give us a mic test over there, Quincy. Let's see if we can hear you.
We're good here, I think.
All right, absolutely. I'm going to move here just a little bit so I can see. So we thought that it would be, instead of a presentation, to do a Q&A. Much more informal. We're an informal group, and Quincy is an informal person as well. So in case you want to know, he's much more comfortable as we are in this setting. So we just wanted to bring him here based, and this was really something Missy and I, like last summer when we were talking about Leadership Summit, most of you probably, or some of you may know that Ginger Nelson from the Mayor of Emerald was here last year, and she gave a presentation. So we're talking about who do we want to speak at the Leadership Summit. This was last summer, and we were talking, oh, it would really be neat to get somebody from on campus. And we started going with some names, and Quincy's name came up very soon. And my thought was, well, that would be great, but that's basketball season. And I was a coach in a previous life, so I know to get a coach to do anything during the season that's not their basketball or their sport is extremely difficult. But Quincy was gracious enough to join us, and they were scheduled to leave today at 11:30, and he even agreed to join us knowing that he was going to have to leave at 11:30. So he's got some other plans, but again, all that just to say we are very thankful and grateful that Quincy's taken the time to share some of his thoughts and ideas about the theme and life in general with us this morning. Quincy, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So last spring, you shared a post on social media that went viral. Got my attention, got a lot of people's attention, a lot of people I talked to. There was a lot of discussion in a very positive way. So if you could just tell us a little bit about, like maybe what inspired you or motivated you to share that. And it was about your experiences here in Canyon, Texas as a black man on our campus and in Canyon, Texas. It was very profound, and we'd just like to hear some thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so I wrote this piece over the summer, and it's not just Canyon, Texas. It encompasses,
right.
I've lived in different parts of the state, not state, but country. Was abroad for a bit, and really my views on being a person of color in this country specifically. Mm-hmm. And the post was born of the issues surrounding the George Floyd murder. And right. I think that was something that moved a lot of people when we saw that happen. And, for me, normally I don't watch, there's a lot of videos out there like that, unfortunately. And traditionally don't watch that. There's a bit of trauma involved with that to have to think about those things and then relate them to yourself. But obviously this one got a lot of traction. It was a lengthy piece, and it was the brazenness of it was something that I think resonated with a lot of people, in a diverse group of people, not just people of color.
Right.
And for me, when I did watch that, I thought, okay, I didn't feel good,
Right.
obviously. And then I started to look at myself and thought, well, how can I enact some type of change? How can I help this cause? And, unfortunately, after that, I think there's a lot of words that draw people to their battle stations.
Right.
There's a lot of trigger words that are used, and when people hear them, they automatically shut down, and the conversation ends at that point. And I think a lot of those were thrown around, and I, social media is great and it's terrible at the same time. It's really, you get good stuff, you get bad stuff. And as I perused social media after that incident, I just saw a lot of conversations that were not constructive. And I thought the issues, faced by people of color in this country were not being addressed in any of these conversations. They were arguments. There weren't people listening to each other. And I wanted to just strip it away and say, okay, well, I'm going to get really uncomfortable, because I don't talk about I didn't talk about race at all
Right.
before this. It's just not something that, I thought about. I tried to, and I think a lot of people of color, their view of it is, how do I get through this without letting it affect me? It's not, how do I actively try and change this? That's kind of the mindset. And so I thought, well, geez, maybe I need to speak up, and I've got a close circle around me. I've got great people around me. I've worked with wonderful folks. And I thought, well, maybe if I post my experience, it lends a voice to other people, that might understand, because they know me,
Exactly.
And I don't care to change, somebody in Nebraska, a guy in Nebraska that I don't know, he doesn't know my intentions. He doesn't know my heart. He has no frame of reference. And my goal is, well, what if just in my circle, I can start with these people, get them to understand what it is that folks are dealing with. And then from there, we can start some really uncomfortable conversations. It's not fun talking about
No.
race.
Right.
And there's so many levels to it. There are so many things involved with it, but there are conversations that need to be had, and they need to be had broadly and amongst people, and they need to be approached with really an open mind and empathy.
Yeah.
And so that's really what drew me to write that post.
Yeah,
So
thank you for sharing that. And I would like to share with you that it was very impactful. I mean, just myself personally, in conversations that Missy and I had and other people here on campus, because I've been here, and I mentioned Canyon because to me it was specific as you were speaking some of the things, and we've been here 20 years, and my thought was a person of color goes through this in Canyon Tech, and I never realized it. And so I thank you for that, because it really opened my eyes and helped educate me on some things that I'd been around for 20 years that I had never even thought of. And I know that that had the same impact on a lot of people across campus. So we thank you for having the courage to put yourself out there, as you said, to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, because it has blessed many people, and we thank you for that.
Quincy, the senior scholars chose the theme of Fuse for this year's Leadership Summit. According to them, Fuse means being a light to those you lead, so you'll make a positive difference in their lives. With that in mind, what are a couple concepts or principles you try to follow to be a light to those you lead?
There's a few things I'd have to say, and I fortunately brought my little cheat sheet here on some ideas that I have. But one of the big things for me, and I was having a conversation, it wasn't even related to this, but now I think it does relate with somebody. And I was talking about, I'm the associate head coach. I'm not a head coach, but at some point I hope to be in that position. And I was thinking, geez, if I'm ever in that position, I want to surround myself with people who challenge my school of thought. I want people who don't necessarily agree with me. And that doesn't mean they're agreeing and disagreeing. It's not telling somebody terrible things. It's just saying, hey, maybe we could do this differently. Or maybe we should look at it from this viewpoint instead of going about it that way. And I think that's incredibly important, to be around a diverse group of people who I guess, feel empowered or have the ability to talk to you candidly about the best way to go about things. And the last thing I would want, and this I was talking to a friend, the last thing I would want is two more of me on my staff. I mean, that would be terrible. I would never learn, I would never grow.
Right.
It would just be an echo chamber of people affirming each other's views and viewpoints. And and I don't think you don't grow unless you get uncomfortable. Like that's the biggest thing for me. You've got to get outside your comfort zone to truly grow. Nothing of any value has ever been accomplished in a place of comfort, I think, in this world. I know in the sports world, you've got early mornings, you've got late nights, you've got, the physical side of it. You really have to go after it, and you're not comfortable for any of that if you want to be successful and if you want to grow. So, in my opinion, I think that's really an important thing as a leader, is to have those people around you that are willing and able to share their viewpoints. And I would say with that, though, they have to feel comfortable to be able to do that. They have to have an equal spot at the table with you. And sometimes it involves swallowing probably a bit of your pride as a leader. I think there's probably a lot of leaders out there who, you want to puff out your chest. You always want to be right. And I certainly always want to be right. But there's a time when you're wrong. And some people take a little bit longer. Sometimes when I'm wrong, I might put up a front for a minute or two, and then I'll look back and say, you know what? All right, I got to swallow my pride. Maybe we should attack this issue or problem in a different way. And I think the ability, it's okay to say that you're wrong at times. I mean, and it really is. And then you grow from there.
I think those are good points. We've really encouraged our lead scholars over the past year, especially to think about the people that surround them in our classroom and recognize the fact that they're not all the same. We have students from all across campus, and I think they've learned a lot from each other in listening and learning instead of reacting automatically. Thank you for that.
Exactly. And if I could, real quick, most are aware, the success that the basketball program has had since Coach Brown and Coach Govan, you came aboard. And I can say, as somebody that's on campus and has players in class and interacts with them, the culture that you've created within that basketball program is very special. It doesn't happen, like you said, there's purpose in it, and you're creating that culture where people feel comfortable being able to share their viewpoints and be able to share their thoughts. And it's very intentional, obviously, as a coaching staff, from your perspective, to allow players to be able to do that, to allow student athletes that platform.
And that's, that Lance Lannert, who writes in the local paper here, so a couple of years ago, I think we were going to an Elite Eight, and he wanted to write a story on Tom Brown, who's the head coach here. And I played for him. We've had a great relationship, long relationship. And, he asked me, what is it about Coach Brown and his style that has allowed you guys to have this success? And the one thing that came to my mind was empowerment. Like, we all have an equal say here. If I feel something, if I believe something, I can tell him that, and he'll listen. And he's not always going to agree with it, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And then when we go to our players, we've got a unified front. We've all agreed upon what it is that we're going to do, and then we roll with that.
Yeah.
So, and I think our players feel the same way. They have a voice too, and I think that's really important. There's different coaching styles, and there's different leadership styles. The hierarchy is one that we don't subscribe to here. It's very decentralized across the board.
Good. That's good.
Okay, in these challenging times we're now facing, why do you believe diversity and unity are so important within leadership positions?
Yeah, so when I was fortunate enough again to get the questions before. So when I thought about this question and I thought of the challenging times now, I thought, well, I think we've been in some challenging times for some time.
Right.
Not just this year, certainly with COVID and a lot of stuff that occurred over the summer, were an exceptionally challenging time. But I think there's probably a few different ways to look at it. And I think as it circles back to diversity, I really believe that diversity drives innovation, it drives outcome. If you look at different Fortune 100 companies, whether it's Amazon, Google, Apple, those are incredibly diverse companies, and they have diverse consumers, and you have to be able to appeal to all of those people. And again, that circles back to having different people at the table. And I think it's important. Diversity is not a quota. It's not, you could have, 30% minority, 70%, majority. Doesn't mean you're diverse. 50% doesn't mean diverse. Diversity is everybody in that room has equal say. Everybody in that room feels shared and feels valued in those conversations. And I think that's incredibly important is to get away from, well, we just need to get these butts in seats and now we're diverse. It's not, that's not the way it works, in my opinion. Yeah. And again, I'm not a scholar. I have no expertise in this. These are just lived experiences. But I was talking to my sister the other day and we were just kind of laughing about, some of that stuff. And again, people need to feel comfortable when they come to work. They feel like they can be themselves. And the analogy she gave was, well, I think there's, people who drive to work and they listen to trap music. And then they walk in the front door and they say, well, good morning, Bob. And to me, that was so funny because, and I'm not saying that you need to play trap music in the office, but people need to feel comfortable when they get to work. They could really be themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when you get the buy-in from the people around you as, hey, here I am, this is who I am. I don't have to hide that. Now let's work together on some stuff. I think that's incredibly important.
Well, you can tell by the theme that the seniors selected as far as Fuse that to the senior scholars, that unifying, shining a light on people that they're leading and unifying and bringing them together is very important to them as a group. So that's, again, the reason for the theme. So to kind of wrap things up and share wherever you want to go as far as your thoughts and ideas, would you take a few minutes and just give them your best advice and ideas as far as how to shine light on people that they lead, and maybe some of the ideas and principles that you use to shine light on those that you lead?
Go to my last card here.
Okay, there you go. That's the last question, so that's where it'll be.
There's a couple things, and these are things I tell our players. I mentioned earlier, social media is great and it's terrible at the same time. And one thing that I really believe is people got to clean up their social media some. And if you're gonna post something, you're gonna repost a meme, what have you, an article, verify it before you post it. The quickest way to lose credibility with me is to post things that are false or not accurate. And then I'm probably just, you know what, maybe this isn't somebody I want to talk to, because they haven't done the background work. And that's something when I see stuff online, I'll independently verify it. And the internet is a beautiful place. There's Google, there's YouTube. Some of the stuff is false, but if you look at enough things, you can figure it out. I mean, there's plenty of that stuff. So that's one thing. You got to be credible if you're going to be a leader. You can't throw stuff out there and then walk it back, and then throw stuff out there and then walk it back. You have to be consistent and you have to be credible. And I feel terrible for a younger generation. Facebook was just coming into existence when I was in college, fortunately. But there's a young generation that I think puts stuff out there, and I think a lot of it may come back to haunt them at some point. But if you're going to say something, stand behind it 100%, and then make sure it's completely accurate, whether it's your Twitter, your Instagram. I mean, that's one thing that I think is incredibly important if you're going to be a leader. You got to be able to do that. Another thing is, an argument versus discussion. And in terms of like, in the diversity realm, right, when we're talking about some of these issues, an argument gets you nowhere. The difference between an argument and discussion. An argument is just two people not listening to each other, just saying things. And it does nobody any good to get an argument. Discussion are two people coming to the table with an open mind. And I always say at the end of a discussion, regardless of whether we agree or disagree, I want to be able to shake your hand and say, I respect you. And that's really important to me. And I think in these times, some of that has frankly been lost. Just an inability for people to say, okay, you know what? I don't see it that way, but I still respect you. And I think we can coexist that way. And then the last thing is access to knowledge. I mean, knowledge is everywhere. I left my phone over there. It's normally in my pocket 24/7. I always have access to that thing. And when I, just circling back to the post that I wrote, one of the responses that I got was, I appreciate it, I respect it. Now, how can I be a change? What can I do to help this cause? How do I help it and not be a problem with it? And then I thought of this, thought to myself, okay, how do I respond to this? And just a quick story, I don't want to be too long here, but in 2008, I bought a 2005 Pontiac Grand Prix. It was a cool car back then. I still have it now. I've told myself, no, it's not cool at all. But I still drive it. I've told myself I'm going to be the last person to drive this thing. I'm holding on to it. But this last summer, I'm driving, the thing starts overheating. I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is not good. Start smoking. I go under the hood. I sprung a leak, a coolant leak. I knew nothing, I don't know much about cars. I'm sure some of you do. But I'm thinking, okay, well, now I'm stuck here. I let it cool down, drove it back to my place. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, I got to get it to a repair shop. How do I do that? I don't want to drive it. It might overheat. So I got to change the coolant. I got to figure that out. So where did I go? Went to YouTube. And I watched, clip after clip after clip of YouTube. So once I felt confident enough, I walked to Walmart. I could have Ubered, but I walked. I picked up a gallon of coolant. I walked back. I set my phone in the hood, and I watched it. Okay, and I opened the cap, poured it in, turned it on. I bled the valve, came out, closed it, and then it ran. And I drove it over to the repair shop. Something I knew nothing about cars. I had no idea how to do that. And I don't think it's any different when we, encounter, whether it be racism or discrimination, and people are like, oh, I'm so helpless. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to live a life in that. And I'm like, the information is endless. There's lectures upon lectures. There's books. There's videos. I mean, and you got to sift through some of it. Not all of it's going to be accurate, but there's just a wealth of knowledge at our fingertips. It's in our classrooms. It's in our homes. It's in our pockets. It's everywhere. And if you really want to understand that stuff, then you got to put the time in. And it's not, it's not a 30-minute course. It's not a 40-minute course. It's a consistent thing. And there's one thing that I've started to do now, and I'm guilty of this because I didn't make a great effort to understand some of that stuff. It was just, I got to get through it. I just got to get through it and worry about it. But after that post, I felt like, okay, now I'm accountable. I've lent my voice to it. I've got to get myself educated. I got to start doing this stuff. And, I have Spotify. There's some great podcasts on Spotify to learn about some of this stuff. I've recently started listening to some Martin Luther King speeches while I work out. I had no idea that I would be so motivated to hit a couple more reps listening to Martin Luther King. Like, it's ridiculous, right? If I'm in, the office sometimes, I'll just have it on in the background. And I may not be listening to everything, but there's points that come out like, oh, wait a minute, let me rewind this. Interesting. And I might write it down. And it's a constant, it's a living, breathing thing, is educating yourself on some of the issues that people face. And I think it's terribly important that we all, I guess, try and do better.
Right. And such a great analogy with the car. Like Missy got the YouTube, I was kind of searching on, but she knew the answer right away. So, and I think it's so powerful that you state as a person of color that you're educating yourself. And how does that speak to people who are not a person of color, and how much, because we have never lived that life, we need to be educated as well, and even more so, I would say. But I think it's very profound and powerful that you share that as a person of color, you are researching and finding and educating yourself, which just speaks to all of us that we need to do much more of that as a nation, as everybody, individually and collectively educating ourselves on that. So thank you for sharing. That's very good.
Thank you, Quincy, for being with us today and for sharing your thoughts. I know everybody took something away, if not all of what you said away. And we just appreciate your time and being here with our Rogers Lee WT 2021 Leadership Summit.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. I'm honored to have been here and for you to think of me in this capacity. So
great. Thank you, Quincy.
Okay, we We have our very first presentation now with our first group of scholars. Please welcome to the stage our servant leadership group.
Okay, thank you all for coming out today and for everyone on Zoom. We hope you all get a lot from our presentation, and also make sure you're paying attention because you never know when we'll ask y'all questions. All right, so we're going to be talking about servant leadership. Y'all are probably wondering, what is servant leadership? So the philosophy is that a leader is servant first.
Hi, I'm Brianna Ramsey, and I'm from Canyon, Texas. My major is health science.
Hi, my name is Zachary Newton. I'm a business marketing major, and I'm from McLean, Texas.
I'm Madison Shuck. I'm a health science major, and I'm from Hugoton, Kansas. All right, so servant leadership. It was made by Robert K. Greenleaf, and that is who is on our screen right here. So Robert based his theory off of two main things. Number one was his father, George Greenleaf, and the second was based on a book called Journey to the East. Now, Journey to the East is a story about three men who are going on a journey, and one of them's names is Leo. So Leo is the servant of the group. He's really just helping them out. He's super happy all the time, like a very singing person, and just very laid back. So one day a storm comes and Leo gets separated from the group. Now Leo had no significant impact on this group of being a leader, but once he was gone, the group fell apart. They had no idea what to do, and they finally found Leo again and said, oh my gosh, and they made him their leader. And I think Robert took away from this is just realizing how they had trusted Leo at the beginning because he showed that he was a servant first and he wanted to have their needs put before his, and they realized that, and then they realized how great of a leader he was after they saw this. So his second is his father, George. So Robert's father is George. George was a city councilman. He helped get rid of one of their corrupt mayors. So this mayor did not voice for the people, and George said this was terrible. So he was very selfless and always willing to help others and wanted people to have a voice. So Robert said when he thought of this model, he thought of his father, George. So this model is based off of 10 principles, and we'll go into detail on those in just a second. But the main emphasis is to serve others first, and then they will trust you as a leader. Our first 3 principles are healing. So an example of this is just making sure that other people are whole, because when they're whole, you get your best from them, and they'll give you their best. And next is empathy, just making sure you understand others and are really trying to put yourself in their shoes. And then building a community. You want to make sure you have a firm foundation for people to reach their goals and work well together.
Okay, so here we have awareness, and then that's whenever you're conscious of yourself, but also the emotions of others around you. And then here we have, sorry, I'm blind, persuasion, which is whenever you're trying to influence those who you're trying to lead, say like a friend, a colleague, a family member. And then we have stewardship, which is actually a form of leadership we're going to be covering today, and then that's whenever we put others before ourselves.
And then we have listening, which is to give full attention to other people and to take away from their input. And then we have foresight, which is to learn from the past. And then commitment to the growth of the people is to help others reach their goal. And then conceptualization is to make a decision based on how it's going to affect you in the future.
All right. So I will be talking about empathy.
I'll be doing awareness.
I'll be doing listening, and then we'll all touch up on conceptualization.
First, we're going to show a video of Simon Sinek, and this is just his take on what he thinks servant leadership is.
The great leaders, that the ones that put us before themselves, the ones that put people before numbers, that would sooner sacrifice numbers to save people and would never sacrifice people to save numbers, ironically, they're the ones that enjoy greater long-term success, greater innovation, greater productivity, greater
Bob Chapman is a good example of that.
Bob Chapman is one of the best examples.
Just give a little anecdote about Bob Chapman.
Absolutely. Bob Chapman runs about a $1.7 billion company based in St. Louis, good old-fashioned blue-collar American manufacturing. When 2008 hit, they lost 30% of their business overnight. But Bob, who doesn't believe in head counts, he believes in heart counts, refused to lay anybody off.
That's great.
And so what they had was a furlough program. Everybody from secretary to CEO had to take 4 weeks of unpaid vacation. They could take it anytime they wanted. They didn't have to take it consecutively. But it was how Bob announced it that was most important. He said, it's better we should all suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot.
All right, I don't know what y'all got from that, but our quote that we took away is that it is better for all of us that we should suffer a little than any of us should have to suffer a lot. So we actually watched this in lead class, and we thought that it was really great to put this in our presentation because it just really spoke to us that how Bob Chapman showed what a true servant leader is. And I think it was important to see how he made even the CEOs, the top people, and the secretaries that are there every day have the same amount of time off and to treat everyone equal. And I think this showed a lot of what a true servant leader is and how we should take that and to apply it into our lives as well. So first is empathy. Empathy is basically just putting yourself in others' shoes and trying to understand them and be in that situation that they're in. So my first is how to apply empathy as a leader is letting other people know that you care, and then they will start to trust you, and that's the foundation of your relationship. So when you let others know that you care, they are more willing to be more vulnerable with you, and when they see that you're intentional, they're really going to have those deep conversations with you and want to get to even know your perspective on it. So making sure that you are just trying to get their trust is really important, because when you build that trust, that relationship is set. Because if you don't build that, then you're most likely not going to get to that top relationship that you really want, that interpersonal relationship with them. So an example of this that Robert had was when he graduated from college, he went straight to the biggest corporation at the time, which was AT&T. Now, Robert's professor had told him, you know, Robert, like nowadays, companies are no longer valuing their people. They're more interested in production and making money, and they're not focused on trying to let their workers know that they're appreciated. So Robert wanted to change this. He went and started doing seminars just explaining servant leadership and how the leaders should make sure that they're trying to get to know their employees and make sure that they're being very intentional with like caring about them. My second point is leaders should accept and they should never reject. So as a leader, you have a very high position and you have a lot of power with that position. And the way that you use that is very important in making sure that you are including others and you're never rejecting them. Once you've said something wrong, you've lost that person and you probably won't ever get them back and you won't get that trust back. So just making sure that you're always trying to put yourself in their shoes and treating others the way that you want to be treated is very important as a CEO or a boss. And this quote goes along with that. So as an educator, you may be rejected by your students and not object to this, but never under any circumstances, regardless of what they do, should you reject a single student. And Robert said this, and I think this is important not just in educators and students, but in everyday workforces and careers. And I hope y'all take this with you, because hopefully we have some CEOs or bosses or just leaders in here, that y'all take this with you and realize that you really need to make sure that you are accepting people and never rejecting them and always making sure you're trying to understand and put yourself in their situation, because you never know what people are going through. And people go through many things every different day. So make sure you're really emphasizing that. And then how to apply empathy to everyday leadership. So make sure that you're making others feel included and that you can relate to them. So just making sure you're putting them in your position, putting their shoes on. And I think something that I've applied this to was learning in lead is what empathy was. So I thought I had this really grand idea that I was a super empathetic person. I quickly learned I was just a sympathetic person. So sympathy is just feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is really actually putting yourself in their shoes and really trying to understand the situation they're in. And Quincy really did a great job of touching up on that and just putting that into perspective of you trying to relate to people as much as possible. So through LEAD, I have learned that I am trying to make sure I understand how people are feeling. And I've applied this to my job. I'm an RA, so freshman girls come in, the most minor things are very inconvenient for them, and you have to make sure that you try to relate to them and make them feel like their problem is a big deal, and make sure that they know that they are listened to and that you are trying to help them as much as possible. So now I am going to hand it off to Zach.
Thank you, Madison. As we continue to talk about servant leadership, I'm going to be talking about awareness, what it is, and how we can apply it to our everyday lives. Of course, when we think about that, we have to ask, what even is awareness? So according to Webster's dictionary, the definition of awareness is the knowledge and understanding that something is happening or existing. Now, when we hear that, we have to ask, why is awareness important for us as leaders? Well, first off, awareness is something we use literally every day. We're using it right now, whether if you're in the crowd or if you're here with us online, going to a business, church, everything. So with that being said, I'm going to talk about why awareness is important for us as leaders. So aware leaders are aware of themselves and are able to recognize their strengths and weaknesses in their everyday life. If we're able to recognize our strengths and weaknesses as people, then we have a better understanding of ourselves as people. And if we have a better understanding of ourselves as people, then we can communicate effectively. We can get to know people better, build better friendships and connections, and we can have a better direction on certain things. So with the next one, we must think before we say and recognize our impact on others and how we communicate. So I'm sorry, Mr. Cameraman. So I'm gonna come down here and imagine like we're just now starting. Nobody said anything. Quincy, Rick, and Missy just haven't even started. So me, Madison, Bree, coming up here, and nothing's being said. Oh, Missy, Rogers lead. Yeah, okay. And it's Madison. Straight up, I'm just like, oh my gosh, Missy, or not Missy, Madison, you were stinky, like so stinky. Like, who even says that? First off, Madison's cool and she doesn't even stink, so, or at least I don't think. But, you know, it's just, it's strange because we need to think about what we say before we say it, okay? So thinking about like more formal terms, let's say that you're a manager of a business, right? And you have certain goals and requirements that you're trying to show for your teammates. And if you were to treat your employees like I just treated Madison, like every day, 365, then more than likely, those employees probably won't follow you. If anything, I'm not even sure if they would be there probably a year later. So we have to remember to be intentional with what we say because our words matter. Okay, so going back to that example, if you think that doing that or saying something like that to your employees is empowerment, it's not. In fact, you probably need to get a new friend group of some sort that empowers you. So with that being said, empowering people is very important. Empowering is just being there for others. When I think of empowerment, I think of lead, you know, whether it be you junior scholars, senior scholars, past senior scholars, they're great examples. They're always being there for everybody. So now I'm gonna go into how we apply awareness into our everyday leadership. So we have to understand our values and how we are as people. Values are what make us us. Of course, like Quincy was saying, everybody is unique in their own ways, and we all have our own beliefs, you know. So the more diverse your crew is, I think the better it is, because I mean, there's certain viewpoints you're like, oh man, I really didn't even think of it that way, right? So with that being said, we're going to talk about how we should listen to others instead of dominating the conversation. So personally, I'm very guilty of this pretty often, depending if I'm pretty knowledgeable about the topic. I love to talk about music. I love collecting records. It's my thing. It's my jam. Shout out to Mobb Deep. We're doing that. So it's crazy because you can learn so much from people that, sorry, my bad. I apologize. Okay. So you can learn so much from somebody else if you are not talking. I think that was one of the most important things I probably learned from Rick, the infamous Rick, talking about how if you are talking, more than likely you are not listening. And you know what? That's very true in certain instances. But yes, lastly, we're going to talk about how we need to ask for honest feedback and how we can improve as leaders. So this is kind of hard for me sometimes. I feel like I'm prideful and be like, oh, I'm good. I don't need to improve on this, whenever it's like, yes, you really need to improve on this, right? So we really need to take into consideration of doing and taking that feedback, swallowing it, and applying it to our everyday lives. So I was going to talk about an example of whenever I applied awareness in my own life. I remember I was a sophomore here at WT, and I was walking through the halls of the JBK, and I was with a group of friends after class. And as I was walking, I actually saw one of my friends. He was he was by himself, and normally he's with somebody or talking to someone, pretty social. And as I was like, well, I was like, dang, that's really strange because he's like by himself, right? So, I walk over to him and so I'm like, hey, what's going on? Normal conversation. And the more we started to talk, the deeper it started to get. And I want to say probably about 30 minutes into the conversation, I learned that his grandfather had passed away the night before. And that was something that was really hard for him to digest. And, with me just being there, it's like, dang, I may not have the right things to say, but I think it means a lot if I just sit there and listen to what he has to say. And at the end of the day, that conversation was probably one of the most important conversations in my life. And we empowered each other. After that, we prayed, and then we split ways. And after that, I think we both still remember it. It was very vivid, and it was very important. So in conclusion, I challenge you to fuse awareness into your life.
Thank you, Zach. So now we're going to go on to listening. So why should great leaders listen? First is we can always learn to grow. We can always learn from someone at some point in time. The more we listen, the more knowledgeable we will become and the better communication we will have with our team. Second is find out the needs of those we lead. We cannot lead the ones if they haven't been heard. And so servant leadership is all about helping the ones we lead. And third is action upon what is heard. Taking action upon what is heard is after listening, you're supposed to take the next step of leadership and take action. When taking action, we must learn to take all and compromise by opinions and ideas. So how to be a great listener? If you are a great listener, then you are also a great leader. By saying that is, most of the time, people think that leaders are the ones who sit back and they tell you what to do. They are the ones who are wise. They teach you and everything like that. But a great leader is the one that sits back and listens and learns from other people as well. And a great leader does not listen to respond. They listen to help other people and do whatever they can to help other people reach their goal. So this quote, it came by me when I was searching for what servant leadership was. And I really think it's a great definition for what servant leadership is. And its communication and decision-making are often represented as the main job of leaders. These skills need to be reinforced by a deep commitment to listening intently to others. And so personally, at first, I didn't know what listening was. I understood that, oh yeah, you're supposed to listen to everybody and, retain it, everything like that. But as a leader, we are supposed to listen and take action. It's not just take it in and then move on. And so my freshman year, very first semester, I was in the IDS class that everyone takes. And we do a lot of group work. And throughout the semester, I was with people who were completely different than me. And it did make a whole lot of sense to me. I was like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get anything done. And later on that semester at the end, we did an assignment, which kind of an experiment, I guess. And we did where one group, it was everybody who had the same exact strength as you and everything like that. And then the second time around, we did people who were exactly opposite as you. And in the end, I noticed that the people who were opposite as me, we were more successful. We came up with more ideas, and it was a lot better that way too. And so I challenge y'all to fuse listening into others. Next is conceptualization. So how can a leader apply conceptualization? First is to sharing of power of decision making. Every person should have a saying, no matter what decision you're making. Make sure that every person has an input or opinion or idea in some way of that form. And second is strategic thinking of decisions for the future. Like I said earlier, what the definition of conceptualization is, that it's making a decision based on how it's going to affect you in the future. And so when you're trying to compromise with everybody and you're trying to make a decision, trying to make every idea into one, you also have to think, how is that going to affect you now? And how is that going to affect you in the future as well?
Okay, so here we have putting others' needs before ourselves. As a leader, I feel like it's our job to be selfless. We're supposed to be doing that. And if we're able to take care of others' needs, I feel like it's kind of like a domino effect. Like if you do that for somebody, they'll probably do it for somebody else. So
And next is accomplishing tasks/goals. So first, you want to make sure you have a group who wants to succeed with you and that you all have that same mindset. And conceptualization is very future-oriented, so you want to make sure you all are paying attention and you have a game plan of what you're going to do, and make sure that you all are willing to accomplish that together.
All right, so now it's game time. All right, so the first question is, which of the 10 principles did we talk about? Healing, empathy, persuasion, or foresight? Anybody? Yes!
Okay.
All right, and the next question is, who created the 10 principles? Albert Einstein, Missy Macon, Robert K. Greenleaf, or Dr. Windler? Yes, Robert K. Greenleaf. And what leadership theory did we talk about? Power leadership theory, great man theory, behavioral theory, or servant leadership theory? Yes, you all get candy. All right, well, burn out bright, but don't forget your fuse.
Let's give another round of applause for Bree, Zach, and Madison. Y'all did a great job. And I think all the things that y'all talked about, all three of you really infused into your everyday lives. And Rick and I are both really proud of who you've become and how much you've grown as a leader just in your 2 years. A year and a half, we're not quite done yet, right? Just a year and a half in lead. So thank you so much, y'all did great. Now we'd like to welcome to the stage Mallory Schilling and Seth McCarty.
So you get home from a long day of work or school. Nothing particularly interesting happened. It was just a normal day. You pull up into your driveway, go into your house. Maybe you throw some Totino's pizza rolls into the microwave, sit down and turn on the TV and just start chilling. When all of the sudden, all of the lights in your house go off. You lose power. Your microwave stops spinning. You don't know what's happening. You don't really know why it happened. All you know is that the lights are off and you want them to come back on. A lot of times, this happens in our own life as well. It goes dark and we don't really know why. All we know is that we want the power to come back on. And we find ourselves at our lowest point and in the dark. So what do we do whenever we blow our fuse? And whenever we find ourselves in the dark?
So as Mallory's just mentioned and described to us, today we're going to be looking at those times in our lives when the lights go off. All of us have these times, and it can be really difficult to be able to get the lights back on sometimes. So we're going to look at how we can stay prepared and then how we can get back up when the lights are off. So from looking at our mental health and how important that is for us to be focusing on the positive and not the negative when we are facing these times. And then being able to understand and label our feelings is also key to helping us overcome any of the darkness that we're facing. And then finally, we'll look at a strong foundation and how important that is to helping us overcome those dark times in our lives. So let's go back. We're going to imagine we're back at our house. The lights have just gone off. You're sitting there. You don't know what to do. And when we're facing these times, when we hit rock bottom, a lot of times, your initial reaction and your initial feeling is just of hopelessness. You don't know how to respond. You don't know what you're going to do about it. There's just a lot of doubt. And so we need to know how we're going to respond when those things happen. So for me, a time when I hit rock bottom in my life took place back in high school. It is related to sports, so don't think of me as like one of those people still living in high school sports. But it was my junior year. So those of you who are athletes or have been athletes in the past, your junior season is really important for college coaches that are recruiting to be able to see really how you're doing and whether they'd want you on their team or not. And so my summer before the junior year, I broke my ankle. And something you should know about me is that I have always loved basketball. Since elementary, I've spent hours a day, hours a week practicing and working towards the goal of playing basketball in college. And that summer when I broke my ankle, it immediately was a feeling of hopelessness and not, the doubt of not being able to reach that goal and to be able to play basketball in college. And I had a choice to make. I could focus on that negative, focus on all the steps I had to climb to get to that goal, but I instead chose to focus on the positive. And so that's kind of where the mental health comes in. When we're facing these times when the lights go off, we can choose how we are going to perceive what we're going through. So we can choose to look at it through a lens of positivity. And really, if you're still alive and you're still breathing, you have a reason to be thankful. You have a reason to stay positive. So now Mallory's going to, long story short with the basketball thing, I did end up reaching that goal. I did get to play basketball in college, so that was awesome. And I think it just is a testament to how that when we focus on the positive, we can get through everything that we're facing. So Mallory's going to touch on how relationships are so important to us when we are facing these times. They're difficult when the lights go off, and how our relationships can help us maintain our mental health.
Yeah, so just like Seth said, relationships are really important whenever we get to this point for two reasons. First of all, because it is not good for us to go through these times by ourselves. And second, sometimes we have to reflect and see which relationships maybe put us in this position and if those relationships are unhealthy or not. So a lot of times whenever we find ourselves in these rock bottom situations, it is the human instinct to push everyone away, especially the people who love us the most, our family. We come home and we lash out at our parents. I know, we're not in junior high anymore, but sometimes whenever we revert, okay? So, we go home, I hate you, I've had a rough day, da, 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 da. We lash out at these people that we love the most, and we don't know why. It's just kind of a characteristic of being at this point. We start pushing people away who love us, and we think that we deserve to be alone. And we think that we deserve this isolation and this loneliness, and that is not true. If we push these people away, we're only pushing ourselves deeper into this dark state. So it's really important to reach out to those people who love you. You are not a burden. That is why you have these people. They want to be there for you. You don't deserve to be alone. So reach out to those people. And like I had said before, sometimes it's really important to look at your relationships and be honest with yourself and say, is this relationship good for me or is it not? Is this part of the reason I am in this position in the first place? And so you have to do some hard work and a lot of reflecting and decide if this is a relationship that needs to end or something you need to go forward with. So it's really important to evaluate your relationships and rely on them while you're going through these times. Like I said, it's really important to reflect and think about where you're at. And a lot of times it takes taking a step back and saying, what is really happening? It's really easy for our minds to fill in gaps and for us to tell ourselves that something is happening when it's not. It's really easy, especially whenever we isolate ourselves, to just ruminate and think and almost create a story that did not exist. So it's really important whenever we're in this dark spot to take a step back and ask your friends and ask the people you're close to, okay, what do you see? Because this is the story I'm telling myself and I'm not sure if it's true or not. So it's really important in order to work through these dark times, to rely on these relationships, but also take a moment to reflect and see what's going on. Oh, okay. So are you feeling? This is a question that is asked often. How are you feeling? And our automatic response is, oh, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm living the dream. Are you really? Are you? A lot of times whenever we're asked this, we don't even think about the answer. We don't want to know. We don't want to get into it at 8 a.m. in the office. And we think surely they don't want to know. As Americans, we have been trained since we were able to talk to not really share much about how we're feeling and to mask our emotions. We're told that if you have little emotion, then you are strong. No, you're a robot. We have feelings for a reason. Feelings are information. The reason we feel things is it's trying to tell us something. It is a warning. It is information. It is not an inconvenience. It is not a hurdle. It is information. We have feelings for a reason, but we like to pretend that they're not there. And guess what? That is not helping you at all. It's not helping any of us. But we tell ourselves that if we can push away these feelings, then we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. But that is the reason that whenever you get in your car at the end of the day and you just feel like screaming or sobbing or both, and you don't know why, and you don't know what you're feeling, all that you know is that you are not okay. So whenever we're in these dark moments, and really even before you get to those dark moments, it's really important to check in with yourself and see how you're feeling and be honest with yourself. So Dr. Mark Brackett, he is the director of the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. And a quote that he has is, "If you can name it, you can tame it." Now, this comes to labeling your emotions and knowing what you're feeling and why. So a lot of times, you might think, well, why is it important to specifically label these emotions? Well, research has shown that if you can actually out loud put a label to one of your emotions, then you've already conquered it. You've already won half the battle. If you can name it, you can tame it. So there has been an experiment to prove this, and it was done at the University of Southern California, and they call this the tarantula experiment. So what they did is they got this large group of people who were all extremely arachnophobic. They were all terrified of spiders. And I don't know if you were afraid of spiders, but those spider people. They are extreme. It's not like, they are afraid of spiders. Okay, so they got a huge group of people who were terrified of spiders, and they split them down the middle. But they both had the same task. Both groups were put in a room with a tarantula in a cage. The first group was instructed to see how close they could get to the spider without saying anything. The second group was also instructed to see how close they could get to the spider, but they were told to explain how they were feeling as they were getting closer to the spider. So the first group, the closest anyone got was about 6 feet away. In the second group, a lot of people, most of the people in the group, were able to hold the spider in the palm of their hand. And the only difference was that the second group honestly probably looked a lot more hysterical because they were saying, I am freaking, I do not like this, this is gross, I hate this, I'm anxious, I'm scared. But they did it. If you can name it, you can tame it. Now, this is called affect labeling. Whenever you put a name to how you're feeling, you've already conquered it. And so that's why it's so important for us to figure out what we're feeling and put a word to it and say it out loud. So this is called the mood meter. This was developed by Dr. Mark Brackett. Now, this is going to help us who maybe are not very comfortable with sharing our emotions figure out what we're feeling. So how this is laid out is in different color quadrants. And it is organized by the level of pleasantness and the energy level. So high energy, low pleasantness is red. That's where you're furious, you are disgusted, you are angry. Blue, that is low energy and low pleasantness. That's isolation, despair, sadness, disappointment. Green is high pleasantness, and low energy. That's when you're feeling chill, serene, relaxed, thoughtful, reflective. And yellow is high energy, high pleasantness. That's excitement and happiness and those kinds of feelings. So I'm going to ask you again, how are you feeling? Think about it. What color quadrant are you in right now? And why? I am one of those people. I used to think that I was above anger. I literally, since junior high, I have always said in my family, it's just kind of weird because I don't get mad. I'm above anger. I guess I don't know. It's so weird that you do. I don't know. Well, I do. And you know what? It's these moments that just whiplash. You are put in your place so fast that your head is spinning. And one of those moments, it was in the Verizon store whenever I was in junior high, and the guy who was working on my phone I thought was cute, and my phone was broken, and my oldest sister embarrassed me because she said, you know why it's broken? It's because she dropped it in the toilet. And me, being above anger, we got into the parking lot, and I was like, I cannot believe you. You were so mean to me. And everyone's like, what is going on? It was not that big of a deal. But this is what happens whenever you suppress your emotions. You cry in the parking lot of a Verizon store, okay? So it's really important for us to figure out what we're feeling, because you do. We all feel things. Just because you pretend you don't does not mean you don't have feelings. It means that you are about to have an outburst that you're not going to understand, and nobody else is either. Listen to these emotions, because emotions are information. I actually saved this mood meter as my screensaver for a really long time to kind of help myself, remind myself to check in with myself and see how I'm feeling. And it took a couple weeks for me to even figure out how to put a label on my feelings, because I was so not used to it. So I encourage you to look at the mood meter, maybe set it as your screensaver, but whenever you get into your car, whenever you can just take a moment, check in with yourself and see how you're feeling, because I promise you will feel a lot better, and you'll have a much more full life, and you'll be able to experience life more so, and you'll be able to connect with people more as well.
All right, so I want you to imagine you're back at your house, but this time it's before the lights have gone off. So you're sitting there, the lights are still on. We're going to look at the ways that you can stay prepared before those lights go off. Something that we have talked about and lead this semester and year is that in life, we are either in a storm, we're going into a storm, or we're coming out of a storm. So there's no in between. And so as leaders and as people, we need to make sure we know how we're going to respond when those storms hit our lives, when the lights go off. So the first, there's a great parable in the Bible. In Matthew 7, Jesus tells the parable about two men. One man who builds his house and foundation on the sand, and another man who builds his house and his foundation on the rock. Everything was fine until the storms of life came. And the man who had built his house on the solid foundation of that rock was able to stand firm through those storms. But the man who had built his house and foundation on the sand was just completely washed away. So as leaders and as people, we need to know what our foundation is and how we have it, how we are prepared to respond when those storms hit our lives and when the lights go off. So the first piece of our foundation that we're going to talk about is confidant relationships. And I know that Mallory already talked about earlier how relationships are important for our mental health, but our confidant relationships are specifically the people that know everything about us. They're the people that are going to tell us what we need to hear and not necessarily what we want to hear when we're going through these times that are difficult. They're the people that can hold a mirror up to us and let us see the true reflection of who we are. Sometimes those relationships can be annoying and difficult, but it's really important that we all have 2 or 3 of those people in our lives. So we want to encourage you, if you don't already know, when we say confidant relationships, if you don't know who those 2 or 3 people are, go home today, or if you're on Zoom, you can start it early. Write down names of people that could be your confidant relationships and reach out to those people. Start building those relationships to help strengthen your foundation. So the second piece of our foundation that we're going to look at is our values. Just like when we need a flashlight when we're going through the dark of a house, we need our values to help guide us through the darkness in our lives when we're facing those times. And our values are the beliefs that you're unwilling to give up no matter what the circumstances are. So I like to picture values as a line drawn in the sand. So no matter what I'm facing, I'm not going to step across that line and compromise my values. One of my values is balance and living a balanced life. A lot of times when people hear that you're living a balanced life, they automatically think, oh, he's trying to evenly distribute his time between everything he's doing. But that's actually not true. Living a balanced life is about making sure that you're not neglecting any of the areas of your life. So for example, right now I've got school going on. I'm involved with LEAD. I've got a career job to search for. I've got family relationships, friendships, all of these things at once. And by living a balanced life, I'm making sure that I am not neglecting any of those areas, but realizing that right now schoolwork is taking up a huge portion of my time. And so making sure that I'm not trying to neglect any of those other areas, but spend the time where it's necessary with the life that I'm experiencing right now. So again, the second piece of our foundation is our values. And if you don't know what your values are, make sure you write those down and know what you believe so that when the storm comes, when the lights go off, those values can help guide you through that darkness. Drew Cameron, in his article on leadership in adversity, reminds us that suffering is not from the symptom of the moment, but rather the root cause that existed long before those adverse conditions existed. So in other words, when we're facing hard times, when those lights go off in our house, it's not as much about that current situation as it is about our foundation that we have or we have not established. So if we don't have that foundation, when suffering hits, it's going to be a much bigger deal than if we already had that foundation established. Outcomes are 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to those outcomes. So if we are able to implement those things that we've talked about today, if we're able to understand, label our feelings, and make sure that we are interpreting the information that we're getting from those, and then being able to maintain and have a strong mental health, focus on the positive, not the negative, and then establishing a strong foundation, we're going to be able to positively affect the 90% of what we're going through. So no longer will we be 100% lost when the lights go off, but we can actually change and improve the 90% of what we're going through. So we want to encourage you today, if you are facing a hard time right now, we want to remind you that the lights are going to come back on and there is hope. Never give up. But if you can implement the things we talked about, you're going to drastically change how you experience trials, how you experience those storms, and when the lights go off. So our last question for you is, on what rock will you build your foundation, and how will you respond and stay prepared when the lights go off?
Thank you, Seth and Mallory. I think it's important to note that they did have a third person. Unfortunately, their third person and their team was unable to present today. So you can imagine preparing for months to have 3 people present and then finding out a week before that there was going to be 2 people present. And y'all did an excellent job of adjusting and gave a great presentation. So thank you for that. So now it's time for the game of life. Let's meet your host.
If you would have asked us a year ago today what we thought Leadership Summit 2021 was going to look like, we would have imagined a room packed full of people. Boy, what a year brings us to where we are right now. Just add that to the list of changes and challenges that this last year in a global pandemic has brought us. There's no doubt that we've all faced unimaginable challenges in this past year. And if you're anything like us, you're sitting there wondering how to adapt to these ever-changing times.
Today, we're going to talk to you about life and the ability to adapt to anything that it has to bring your way. To make this a little bit more interesting, we're going to be playing a game, the game of life. But first, let's talk about the leadership model that got us here.
There are so many leadership models that you can study and model your life around. From servant leadership, which we've heard about today, to transformational leadership, they all have their strengths. But today we'll be going over a new model, the adaptive leadership model.
Grounded in the principles of contemporary leadership, adaptive leadership provides leaders with the basic framework they need for dealing with change in a way that not only involves their followers, but empowers their followers to create change for themselves. By listening to their followers, adaptive leaders create an environment where every person is involved in finding the solution, and ultimately, every person can face challenges with confidence. Now, this is where the game of life starts. But before we start, let's lay some ground rules.
On the left side, you see the rules to the game of life. And on the right side are the foundational principles of adaptive leadership through the HYPES model. You see, the rules for today's game are simple. Reveal your real-life scenario card, think through all your options, make a decision, and then share.
Our adaptive leadership principles are a little more detailed, but share the same basic ideas. First, you have to get on the balcony or get a fresh perspective on the problem at hand. This is like the listening and thinking through part of your game scenario.
Next, adaptive leaders must identify adaptive challenges. This just means that they don't look for problems that they could solve by themselves. Instead, they look for problems that require the input of everybody on the team. This is like the sharing part of today's game.
Regulating stress comes next. It's a good practice no matter the situation or action that you're taking right now. Just know that adaptive leaders monitor and manage stress like pros.
The second to last foundational principle of adaptive leadership is maintaining disciplined action. This means following through no matter what. And believe us when we tell you, there's no going back once you make your decision in the game of life.
Finally, adaptive leaders must protect all voices who have influence. In this case, that means anyone who's here today that wants to share will have the chance to do so.
All right, now that we've gone over the rules for the game and the foundational principles of adaptive leadership through the HYPES model, we're going to be looking at another framework of adaptive leadership and see how these foundational principles are about this framework as well. Let's get started and play the game of life.
The first step in adaptive leadership is anticipation. Now, anticipation may seem like an easy first step, but it goes beyond thinking ahead to a test or a deadline. Adaptive leaders are good at thinking ahead and predicting future events, trends, and problems before they ever even occur. This allows them to prepare not only themselves, but everyone else on their team, so no one is taken by surprise. All right, y'all look a little confused, so this is where we get to play our game. Let's say you're about to graduate from college and you're headed into the real world. You have 3 job offers from 3 great companies, but you're still on the fence about which one you're going to choose. So take a few seconds and look these over, and then y'all can share. Okay, are y'all ready? Okay, someone raise a hand, speak up. Go ahead. Okay, awesome. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Number 3, all right, I'll take it. Okay, so as you can see, This decision might take more than just your basic pros and cons list. It would take you to get on the balcony, take a step back, and look at the whole picture instead of the decision that's just right in front of you, and anticipate for future events. For example, is this the industry you want to be in for the rest of your life? How will this job affect your home life? Will this company allow you to grow with them? By simply looking at this decision through the lens of anticipation, instead of the lens of immediate benefits, you are thinking like an adaptive leader who understands that life is more than one series of events after another, but a fusion of many different decisions that requires many different perspectives. Okay, now that you have a job, let's hear what Maddie has to say about the people who are along for the ride on your leadership journey.
Thanks, Elena. Now picture this. You're traveling across the country with your company to an expo when all of a sudden you start having car troubles. What are you going to do? Are you going to call your supervisor and let him know what's going on? Or are you going to see who's in your car and if anyone knows how to solve the problem? Or are you going to try to ignore the issue and just hope you can make it to the expo on time? Take a minute to collect your thoughts and then we'll share. Awesome. So who would like to share? Yes. Awesome, thank you. Anybody else? Number 2, okay, awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. Those were all great answers, but let's take a look at this through the lens of the second step in adaptive leadership, which is articulation. Now, articulation is probably not what you think about when you think about adapting to something, right? Well, it's actually a key component to successfully adapting. Keyword successful. Articulation is just another way of saying communication, and we all know that communication is an essential part of leadership. Communication is used to define problems, set boundaries, and build collective support or understanding. Ignoring the issues will only cause further complications and add stress. Take our car scenario, for example. Ignoring the issues will almost certainly result in a major complication down the road and add stress to both yourself and the passengers in the vehicle. Similar to a leadership scenario, those people are counting on you to get them to where you're going. Ignoring the problems and potentially placing them in harm's way only serves to break their trust and destroy the relationship. It is highly unlikely that those people will ever want to ride in a car with you ever again. As popular author and leadership expert Simon Sinek says, great leaders communicate and great communicators lead. So with articulation, it's also important to think about who you're communicating to. Who's riding in your car with you when things go wrong? Who are those people you can trust and count on when difficult situations arise? Those are the people you want riding in your car with you. The ones who don't shy away or avoid dealing with problems. You want the effective communicators. The ones who will tell you like it is. The ones who will tell you that you need to replace all 4 tires before you can even get back on the road again. Is your team filled with people you can count on and trust? If not, the best way to develop that trust and relationship is through communication. That's what makes articulation such an important step on the path towards adaptive leadership. It builds relationships and defines problems, leaving you and your team with room to adapt and grow. Speaking of adapting, I'll let Miguel dive a little deeper into what it truly means to adapt.
All right, thank you, Maddie. All right, first of all, I want you to go ahead and picture yourself in your dream house. Now that you have the picture, I want you to go ahead and picture yourself with the problem at hand. And I'm gonna give you a quick example. So, fire, fire, fire. You know, your house is suddenly on fire, so you only have a few seconds to react. You only have a few seconds to act and get out of your house safely. Get everybody out to safety. Once you have managed to do so, you have another problem at hand that's rising up. And that problem is that you need a place to settle meanwhile. So I'm gonna give you, I have three options for you that are gonna make this situation a little bit more easy. And those options are, you have the option of renting a place, you have the option of investing in a new place, or reconstructing this place that burned down. Because come on, you know, you love this place. So I'm gonna give you a few seconds to think about it and then share your response. All right, all right. If anybody in the audience wants to share the response, you're more than welcome to. 3, all right. Anybody else? 2, 1, all right, we have responses from all over the place. All right, so you probably, if you haven't figured it out by now, this whole scenario is an example of adaptation. Adaptation is the third A of the 4 A's model of adaptive leadership. Adaptation, it's the art of understanding that there is continuous learning and that you should only create change once is needed. If things are running their course, if things are going good, you shouldn't change anything about them. With that in mind, I want you to think about something else. I want you to think about the first person that comes into mind when you think about a famous leader. I mean, chances are that you are thinking about a politician, someone from the royal family, you know, back in England, stuff like that, or even a famous celebrity. Well, it's a good response because, you know, they're always in the spotlight. You relate them to power, and most likely they have a leadership title under their name. But what happens when problems begin to arise? What happens when things start to go wrong? Are they capable of adapting? Are they capable of doing different things, you know, for the situation that's at hand? With that in mind, we come back to a saying that I like to say, and that saying is, "The new is always better" for this kind of situation. You shouldn't be afraid of doing things differently. You shouldn't be afraid of thinking about thinking of the things that you did wrong in the past and adapting to the things that for a different chance in the future. Always finding loopholes, always finding different chances, always being able to switch gears, you know, when a problem is at hand. This is gonna take us to our definition or our topic about a true leader. A true leader is able to always go about the situation, not to solve the problem, but most importantly, to seek that the problem doesn't repeat itself anymore in the future. An adaptive leader is someone that's able to go about the problem without hesitation, intimidation, and most importantly, being always with that desire of being the different person in the room. You shouldn't be afraid of thinking differently. You shouldn't be afraid of being that different mind in the room. We already heard from our guest speaker, you know, about always seeking discomfort, always getting out of your comfort zone, and being able to adapt to anything that our situation brings at hand. With that, I want to give you another example. And that example, just picture yourself that you're on the freeway. And if you're here from the area, you know, picture yourself you're going from Canyon to Amarillo on I-27. All of a sudden, you start seeing a drop of speed of the cars, you know, in the highway. You start seeing traffic piling up ahead, and you only have a few seconds to react and to create different chances that you can take in order to reach point B from point A. It's not really about what you do when you arrive to the problem. It's about what you do when you see the problem, and the most important thing is whatever you do, you know, between that time, that you're able to see the problem and actually be in the problem. It's all about those actions. So just like adaptive leadership, you know, the example of the how is always about, it's about always finding a gap, always finding a solution, always finding a faster way that's safe as well, you know, to reach your destination or your common goal. It's always important to think about the safety of your group, the safety of your others, if you're part of a group, part of a team, etc. It's always about finding a different way, always being that person that finds different tactics, being that person that's not afraid of taking risks, while you're taking that risk, being mindful to always have a solution, if things don't go your way. With that, I want to go to a real life situation, and I don't think anybody could say it better than Reed Bonadonna in his article of adaptive leadership and the warfighter. Much like the army or any other military position, we see it ourselves, in our careers nowadays, to always being able to adapt. We see that our employers are always looking for people that are able to not only to go with, for their skills or knowledge, but that they're capable of always finding different things to do when a problem rises. It's not about the experience or anything that you have done so far. It's about what you can do in the future. It's about what you can do for a better tomorrow and for a better future in the company, team, group, or anything like that. With that, I want to come to our conclusion, and I want you to take this as an example of how you can, put all this experience and all this adaptiveness into the future decisions that you make in your life. Let this be an example of how you can put this whole experience and this whole situation, in the workplace or even at home. If you go back to the scenario, you can start seeing that you found yourself in a pause stage in the aftermath of a disaster. Your house burned down and everything. You had three options. I gave you three options that you can choose from. You could choose from. But now you start to realize that it wasn't about the options really. It was honestly really about what you were able to do from that time that you saw the options to what you could have done, in your final outcome. And this is where I really want to leave you off. It's not really about what you say that you can do, it's about what you can do. Remember that actions speak more than words. You should always be capable of doing what you put yourself out to do. If you're gonna say that you're gonna do something, you should be able to, to back it up and do it. And with that, we're gonna hear Bailey that she's gonna explain the last point about that of the 4A's model of adaptive leadership. And you're gonna start finding out of how your knowledge and your experience with adaptation is gonna help you with anything that life has to throw your way.
Thanks, Miguel. The final step in the model is accountability. Let's take a look at the real life scenario card we drew in the game of life. A coworker you are mentoring makes a mistake that goes against company policy the first week on the job. What do? Do you, 1, ignore it and hope they take personal responsibility? 2, you take personal responsibility since you were the mentor? Or do you, 3, constructively point out the mistake and then give feedback for the future? Take a second to think about these options, make your decision, and then you can share. Okay, do I have any brave ones that want to share? 3? Awesome. You're exactly right. Adaptive leaders would have chosen to point out the mistake and then given feedback for the future. Let's take a look at the principle of accountability and see why this option was the best. When we first think of accountability, we often pair it with responsibility. But we're going to break these two words apart and see how different they actually are. Responsibility is simply taking ownership for an action. Whether it was right or wrong, it's saying, yes, I did that. Accountability is a principle taken further than just saying what you did or maybe even didn't do. The majority of leaders don't have a problem with announcing or claiming their actions. But a problem arises when we don't go beyond this surface level of responsibility. Once we take ownership for our actions, taking responsibility, we have to follow through with accountability, checking ourselves and our teammates and making sure that our performances are where they need to be. Managing performance is one of the most important things we can do as a leader. How do we expect to get the results that we're striving for if we're not managing our performances? The answer is simple: we don't. Whether we're on a team, we're in a classroom, or we're even in the workforce, we have to manage our performances with the principle of accountability. This can be done by both self-reflection and constructive criticism by a trusted leader or mentor. Constructive criticism. That's a hard pill to swallow. Many avoid it at all costs and run the opposite way. Adaptive leaders, though, they don't shy away from constructive criticism. They run right towards it. They crave it. You see, we're social beings, and no matter how hard we try to hold ourselves accountable, it's so much easier to feel the need to be held accountable by another person. Leadership connoisseur Simon Sinek gives the perfect example of this when he says that we can tell ourselves every single day that we're going to get up and go on a run, and we still won't do it. Guilty. But if we have a running partner that's agreed to show up at a certain time, at a certain place to run with us, we're going to show up because we feel the need to not let them down. Sales and leadership expert Ryan Estes says that the biggest challenge that leaders face today is not the lack of willingness to change, but it's the lack of discipline in being consistent in these changes. Everybody wants to change. Everybody wants to get up and go on a run. So why don't we do it? We're not being held accountable. Performance and end results are driven off of self-reflection, constructive criticism, and accountability. In order to obtain those high level of performances and reach those end results that we're all striving for, we have to incorporate accountability into every area and aspect of our lives. We've all heard the saying, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. But what lies between the start line and the finish line is accountability, just like in the game of life.
After diving into the 4 A's of adaptive leadership, we can see how they all fit together like a puzzle to build an effective leader. Leaders come to a challenge, address it, handle it, and then quickly move on. But adaptive leaders, effective leaders,
Anticipate a challenge,
articulate a way to get through,
adapt to whatever life has for them,
and then hold themselves and their team accountable.
So you're wondering how all of these pieces fit together, and there's a lot to put together. Unlike in the game of life or in real life, I'm going to help you do just that. Before you can be an adaptive leader for your followers, you have to be an adaptive leader for yourself. This means living out the principles we talked about today: anticipation, articulation, adaptation, and accountability. When you put all of these things into practice, your life will become fusible, not feasible. So, what's the difference between those two words? Feasible means likely or possible. Feasible, on the other hand, that means easily put together. Would you rather live a life where you're likely to get things done, or a life where you make time for yourself and can easily put all of these pieces together? When you practice fusing, you integrate every aspect of your life: work, home, family, and your personal life, and can confidently adapt to change as an individual. Then you can carry that confidence into the workplace, organization, or any other leadership role that comes your way. By fusing or making decisions with an adaptive mindset, you are becoming a leader that understands that life is not just a series of one decision after the next. You're a leader who will walk through the game of life and who will look forward to the challenge, love the challenge, and embrace the challenge. Facing challenges is no longer feasible, but fusible. Thank you. You won the game of life.
You guys did a great job, and I think you are wonderful examples of adaptive leaders, and actually the rest of you in LEAD as well. Y'all have been wonderful examples to the rest of our university campus on how to adapt in these circumstances that we're all experiencing right now. Now, if you'll please welcome to the stage Kayla Smith, Levi Emanuel, Hannah Franklin, and Liz Eichenberger for our final presentation of Leadership Summit 2021, Transformed People Transform People.
Good morning. As Missy said, we are going over the last leadership concept for today. Transform people, transform people. So, what is transformational leadership? Transformational leadership is when a leader goes into a team and figures out all the things about each one of their team members and uses that to go to the common goal. So, we're going to go over 4 concepts this morning. Hi, I'm Liz Eichenberger, and I will be going over the first concept, individualized consideration.
Hello, my name is Hannah Franklin, and I will be talking about inspirational motivation.
Hi, I'm Levi, and I'm going to go over intellectual stimulation.
I'm Kayla Smith, and I'll be going over idealized influence.
All right, to begin, what is individualized consideration? We're going to take the theme of Leadership Summit, Fuse. Now, if you're an electrician in here or watching online, I suggest you go and take a coffee break now, because I really don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to accurately putting something together. But I do know that with electricity, with wires, and with a light bulb, we can probably get the light bulb to turn on. So the goal of this is the light bulb to turn on. And as the leader, we're going to be the electrician. And the wires are going to be each person on your team. So before we can turn the light bulb on, we have to know what the wires are capable of doing. So as the electrician, we're going to figure out what these wires can do. So just like your team, they're all different. They all have different skills. They all have different weaknesses, and they all can help complete the common goal of turning on the light bulb. So take this back into real life. You're making that one-on-one relationship with each person in your team, just like getting to know each one of these wires to complete turning on the light bulb. So keep that little picture in your head as we continue on. We're going to break this down a little farther, because these are big words that are up on the screen and big words that we're going to continue to talk about today. But we're going to break it down for you. So individualized and consideration. We're going to hit individualized first. I talked about it just a little bit ago about making that one-on-one relationship, being intentional about making that one-on-one relationship with each person in your team. And consideration is taking all of the knowledge that you've learned from each person and applying that to your common goal, knowing their skills, putting them in places where you know that they'll succeed, and taking their weaknesses and helping them grow through those. And once that has happened, all of these will be accomplished in your relationship: support, empathy, respect, understanding, and celebration of each other. So let's go back to the metaphor that we had at the beginning of the light bulb. Well, when the light bulb turns on, you've completed your goal, right? That totally makes sense. Unfortunately, in real life, it's not as easy to recognize. So there are 2 components that will be completed once the goal is at its time and is completed as well. So first is developmental orientation. This is more of what the members will do on their own time. It's a big self-reflection time for them. They're going to learn about their skills, their weaknesses, their goals, their focus, everything that drives them and motivates them. And they're going to communicate that to you while you're building that one-on-one relationship. The second part is where you as a leader come in. And that's individualized attention. You're going to take, again, all of that information that you have learned about that person and put it to work. You're going to get to that goal with your team, running alongside them, knowing where they're good and knowing where they need help. And after that, you will get success, development, and empowerment, a transformed team, and you as a leader are transformed as well. Getting to know all the people that are on your team, building those relationships is benefiting you and your team members. Transform people, transform people.
Returning hate for hate only multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to read one part that I think that we should focus on today one more time. If you're taking notes, Go ahead and write this down. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. I'm going to be talking about inspirational motivation. So first, we are going to be doing a little bit of reflection. Who inspires you? I'll give you a couple moments to think of who that person is. Maybe it's a friend who's always there to pick you up after a long day. Maybe it's a parent who's always pushing you to success. Maybe it's a grandparent who's always there to give you a smiling face and motivate you to keep going. Maybe it was a high school teacher who encouraged you to apply for college. Maybe it's your college professor who makes you passionate about seeking after your future career goals. Or maybe it's an advisor for a program that you're in, possibly called Rogers Lead WT. Who is it that inspires you? I'll give you another moment to think of who that person is. Now that you've thought of that person, let's think about what they do to inspire you. Maybe it's their communication. It's the words that they speak to you and to others. Maybe it's their behavior and how they treat others and how they treat you. Or maybe it's how they made you feel. Last, it could just be their daily impact on your life. How they go throughout their day-to-day life impacts you in some sort of way. Who is it that inspires you? I want you to think of that person. Write down the name, think of that person in your head. Now we're going to be looking at inspiration versus motivation. What is it and why is it important? This says that inspiration is the way that you feel about completing a task or goal. It's a feeling. Essentially, it's goal setting. Now, motivation, on the other hand, that is the follow through to complete that task or goal. It is the drive to accomplish goals. So we have the feeling that motivates us and then the follow through with that. Inspiration versus motivation. So now, what does this mean altogether? And what is the expectant theory? So this says that inspirational motivation involves behavior to inspire and motivate followers with a shared meaning and to challenge them to complete that goal. So in order to have that, again, we're looking at a shared meaning and a challenge to complete a goal. So that is where the expectant theory comes into play. In order to expect things from our followers, we first have to lead by example in order for them to follow that way. The expectant theory reads, people will behave in the manner that we expect from them. The opposite is true. If we don't have high expectations and high goals, they will not perform highly. So again, in order to be inspirational and motivational for our followers, we have to first set the example. So now it's time to take action. We've been listening to several presentations this morning about different ways that we can be a light and we can fuse our community. But now it's time to act upon it. We can sit here, we can listen, and we can take notes. But unless we act, it means nothing. So I want to encourage you to think again of that person that inspired you. Now that everyone has a name in their mind, I want to encourage you to contact that person. Contact that person and thank them for inspiring you in some way. Reach out to them and share the impact that they made on your life and how special and important that is to you. If they are still living today, go ahead, find them on social media. Shoot them a text to meet up. Send them an email. Contact that person and thank them. In order to be a light for other people, we first have to recognize the light in our lives. So I'm going to read another quote by Martin Luther King Jr., who I believe was a light in our world and our community. Every man must decide whether he will walk in the light of creative altruism or the darkness of destructive selfishness. It's your choice. Are you going to take action? Transformed people transform people.
Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, so let's dive in. Intellectual stimulation. As you can see, this is the definition by Bass and Aviel, who are the 4 founders of this model. So as you can see, it mentions problem solving, critical thinking, innovation, and creativity. If you're in the workforce, your job should be providing this for you. If you're in academics, your classes will provide this for you in your material. So now that you know what it is, let's talk about where it's seen. These are just a few of the industries that intellectual stimulation can be viewed: healthcare, STEM, business, and academia. For today, we're going to focus on business and academia. So let's dive into business. I want to paint a picture for you. You work at a company for several years, and they're about to launch a new product. There has to be a campaign with this product, and so your boss has assigned you to choose between 2 teams. Team 1 is people that come into work, they get their job done, they go back home. There's not much interaction, they get their job done, and they have results. The other team, they're there to grow into their role in that company. They're there to fit into that position that they need to be in for that team. So which one would you choose? Go ahead. So that was choice number 2. And obviously, I would choose the same choice. It seems very obvious, but that's not the case. And actually, you may not even get an option 2. You might only have 2 teams of number 1. And so understanding how you can make a difference in that team is going to affect the growth of that company and the transformational growth that you experience within. And so for the academic side, I think where we're struggling with this is because of criticisms. Sorry, criticisms. So when you hear that word, there's a negative connotation around it. You're probably thinking, okay, I don't want to listen anymore. This is going to be kind of weird. That's not the case. We have to fix our mindset with this so that way society doesn't shape us, or we can shape ourselves. And the reasons are straightforward. It's to teach art, right and wrong. So for right, there's a right way to criticize. There's a right and wrong to everything. You understand that you need to ask for insight on the idea or the problem at hand. Thomas Carlyle stated that the worst thing you can do is have action without insight. In this case, it's communication. If you don't ask for insight on a problem and somebody mentions something, your initial response is going to be negative, and then you're going to shut them out, and their environment will not allow for that communication. Next, you have to actively listen. They say that you have 2 ears for a reason. It's a good reason. And so I'm going to tell you a joke. This is going to be my comedic debut, okay? So, knock, knock. Guess what? It's not about you. It is not about you. It is not about you. I will keep saying that. Once you understand that it's not about you, this is going to revolutionize your growth as a leader and as a team member. And in your classes, when you have that outward focus, this is going to allow for that classroom environment to be amazing and absolutely mind-changing, and more development will happen here. And lastly, rebuttals are done in a constructive manner. If you don't have a response that's in a constructive manner, you're going to lose that individual and they're going to shut you out. They won't listen to your response, they won't listen to your advice or any statements you make. And so for the other side of that, there's some wrong ways. You criticize the person, not the idea. When you start criticizing a person, they will shut you out, which is a normal response. They have every right to. You have to differentiate the idea from the person. Next, you only speak rather than listen. If you're the only one talking and you're not taking that feedback from your team, you are doing it wrong completely. Next, lack of self-awareness where you're at in the communication process. There is a system to communicating, and there is ultimately turns and cycles. If you don't understand where that cycle is, you're not going to have a productive environment that your team can communicate within. And lastly, you don't have humility. We are human. You're not going to be perfect. No one is going to be perfect. And if you understand that from the very beginning and have grace within your team, you're going to have better results overall. I want to close out on a principle that's from Amazon, founded by Jeff Bezos. And it reads, have backbone, disagree, and commit. Leaders are obligated to respectfully challenge decisions when they disagree, even when doing so is uncomfortable or exhausting. This is important because you have to speak out. It's not going to be very easy to speak out, but whenever you're facing the majority as a minority, it's going to be intimidating, but you have to do it to be able to speak. Leaders have conviction and are tenacious. They do not compromise for the sake of social cohesion. Once a decision is determined, they commit wholly. Whenever there's discourse in a team, you have to agree that whenever y'all come up with a solution, You will all act 100% effort, integrity, and quality on that assignment or whatever it may be doing. You're not going to jeopardize that. You have to commit wholly and move forward as a team. Transform people, transform people.
Idealized influence, by definition, means leaders who behave in ways that result in them being role models for their followers. These leaders are respected, admired, trusted, making their followers want to emulate them. John Maxwell says, "A leader's greatest gift is not only passion and commitment, but most importantly, passionate commitment." Think about somebody who you follow or deem to be an exceptional leader. Why do you do so? Is it because of their age? Do you feel obligated? Is it respect? Is it in their integrity? Or is it because they have respect for you back? You see, people will match each other's energy and respect. So when somebody respects you, typically you're going to reciprocate it. And that'll then set the tone for the entire environment that you're in. The emotions and actions that you portray will spread to those around you. When you show passionate commitment, others will start running towards the light that you're portraying. So you see, this is when the phrase transform people comes into play and becomes relevant, whether it's on purpose or not. Everybody has a role model, leader, or a mentor that they trust, but what we tend to forget is they haven't always been that way. They've had to transform into that person, not just for themselves, but for you, to lead you. You see, idealized influence has very many strong core values. And I've already kind of talked about respect, but there's so much more to it than that. There's trust, integrity, maturity. We talk about respect like it's just going to happen or we feel like it is deserved, but it's not without all those core values in place. Now, what about on the other hand? What do we do about disrespect? Do we just kind of sweep it under the rug and forget that it ever happened and avoid it? Disrespect causes so much toxicity in a relationship or wherever it may be, and it can't be avoided. Think of it like a sin. Nobody wants a God who declines to deal with evil. We want a righteous God who decisively deals with all evil. Similar context is to disrespect. When a boss disrespects you or vice versa, it must be handled. It can't be avoided. And now it's not in a prideful, all-deserving manner, but it too must be handled respectfully. You see, in order to embrace this concept, we have to be able to manage our emotional shift. It is so easy to get worked up and to want to say something back. Believe me, I get it. But to have the emotional intelligence to keep your composure and to continue to be civil and considerate in a situation like that is so much louder than your voice could ever be. Christine Parath explains that civility and respect can be used to boost an organization's performance. This is why it is so important to remember that what can be seen as uncivil or disrespectful to one person can be completely fine to the next. And incivility is so contagious. It can be passed on by experiencing or really just by seeing it happen to somebody else. It begins a domino effect, not just from person to person, but internally within your own actions and emotions. And that is why we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable for our own actions and responses to other people's behaviors. We have to be the person that's the last domino standing, that doesn't knock down the next person that we see. So I'm encouraging you to be aware and notice the influence that these other leaders bestow and learn how to give this to others. Whether it's an idealistic mind, a listening ear, or just trust and respect in a relationship, these all display the 4 concepts of transformational leadership.
The first being individualized consideration, making that one-on-one relationship with your team members and really valuing the relationship that you build together.
Second is inspirational motivation, seeking after that person who once inspired you and thanking them so that therefore that motivates you to do that for someone else. Don't forget, contact that person sometime soon.
Third, intellectual stimulation. It takes more than one to get things done.
And last, but certainly not least, idealized influence. Remember to be the leader that has the respect for their followers so you can be the role model.
Remember, transformed people transform people. Thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. And I know I have so many different takeaways from every single presentation that happened today. And I don't know, Rick, how you feel about this, but we might be out of a job. Like, y'all are awesome. Y'all should really just kind of take this show on the road. And I know that you have for our virtual audience today, and plus for our junior lead scholars that are in the audience today. So next week in class, maybe we're just going to turn it over to y'all. How about that? Y'all did a really, really great job. We are so proud of you. Give yourselves another round of applause. Before we leave you today, I need to make sure we also thank some more people again and some additional ones as well. We'd like to thank Kimberly Cornelson, Sammy Thompson, and Hannah Scarborough in the Office of Student Engagement and Leadership, because as Rick mentioned earlier, we have had some absences the couple first weeks of the semester, and without them, this wouldn't have been made possible. Also to Allison Wallace and 1910 PR for helping us with the marketing and all of the things. They did a fabulous job too, and we're a joy to work with. To Clint Chambers, Chance Haugen, Megan Ward, and all of the AV techs that made this virtual presentation and all of these things possible and helped Rick and I, because we definitely can't handle that technology piece. Y'all did awesome too, and we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much. Everybody that is in the audience today, whether you are with us virtually or you're with us in Legacy Hall, we really appreciate you coming, supporting our lead scholars, and we hope that you took away many things from every presentation as well today. Thank you so much, and we look forward to hosting you in 2022.